Hey, everybody. Welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have author Danielle Crittenden with us today. We'll chat with her in just a moment. But first, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So, Danielle Crittenden is a journalist, author, and former host of the Femsplainers Podcast and Substack, known for her incisive commentary on women and modern life. Her work has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic, and more. She is the author of 5 books, including What Our Mothers Didn't Tell Us, Why Happiness Eludes the Modern Woman, and her new memoir, Dispatches from Grief, A Mother's Journey Through the Unthinkable, which chronicles the sudden loss of her 32-year-old daughter Miranda in 2024 and the interminable years of pain, love, and life since then. Danielle, welcome into the back room.
Thank you, Andy. It's such an honor to be with you.
Likewise. Congratulations on the book. It's called Dispatches from Grief, A Mother's Journey Through the Unthinkable. Congrats on the critical acclaim and the overall success that you and the book have been receiving. It really is an incredible book. It's poignant and heartbreaking and so revealing and written with such raw, brutal honesty and clarity. And as someone who's been living in what you refer to as the alternative universe following the murder of my wife, Adrienne, 20 years ago, it really resonated with me on so many levels, as I would imagine it is resonating with so many other people. So thank you for writing this truly important memoir.
Oh, well, Andy, I know the story of your wife, Adrienne, and I admire what you've done in her memory since then. I think this impulse when you lose someone this close to you, and especially tragically and suddenly, you really have that motivation to keep them going and, in some form. And, what you've done is really beautiful.
Thank you. And likewise. But it's interesting. What I've learned in 20 years since Adrienne's death is that not everybody gets beyond the tragedy and then has a desire to tell the story. I think if you're a natural inclination as a writer, if you're a storyteller, if you're a filmmaker, if you're sort of predisposed to do that on some level, I think it becomes much easier to do that. But a lot of people, I met the children of some, tragedy happens and they just go into a room and they shut the door and, and they don't come out for a long time. Right. Some don't ever come out. And so I've always felt lucky that I had that in me to share my story. And I also made a documentary about her life and death and how a family navigates through this kind of sudden tragedy. And so I just, whenever I see somebody like you put something out there that tells your story, your family's story, and how you've navigated and continue to navigate your tragedy, I become obsessed with that kind of stuff because every family has something. It's just varying degrees. And there's also that debate of sudden death versus long-term illness and, getting to prepare.
There's sort of the grief competition, the grief hierarchy. Who's in the worst circle of hell,
Yeah, well, it's funny. After Adrienne died, I'd have people talk to me and they'd be like, well, I got to go to see my grandmother. Her cat just died. I mean, it's not like what happened to you. And I'd be like, well, it's actually worse. And they'd be like, no, it's not. I'd be like, no, it is, because that cat to your grandmother meant the world. And she didn't know Adrienne. She did not know Adrienne. So it's okay. It's okay for that cat to your grandmother, to have more significance in her life than my wife. And I would always try to let people off like it's not a contest.
Well, it's also like sometimes, and as relentlessly frank as my book is, as you described, there are sometimes people say things so terrible, it's actually fun. Like you can just laugh. Like,
Yeah.
I have a lot of empathy for really anyone who is trying to address someone in our situation and trying to figure out what to say. But sometimes it's like the cat comment. I'm just rolling with this one.
Well, it is kind of shocking that I don't know, like people said shocking things to you in the sense of just like complete, utter tone deafness. But if you know the story of what happened to Adrian. So for the first several days, she was reported to be a suicide. Her killer staged it as a suicide, and I found her with a rope around her neck. And
Oh my God.
and so there was a friend of hers who called about a week after, and my house was filled with people. I'm sure you know that drill. And he said, "Yeah, I just thought I'd come over and hang for a while." And I was like, probably a better,
Oh no.
might have used a better word than hang. Like I was like, okay, I'm just gonna roll with
Oh
it, just like
man.
you said. And
Oh
there was so
man.
many other, instances like that where I was
Yeah.
like, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe you
Well,
could have just thought a little bit more.
yeah. Well, I have one scene in the book, which is I start to think of some of these comedic moments. It's like, when you watch a very brutal Shakespeare play filled with murder after murder, and then Shakespeare will cut to the, drunken guards outside the castle just for some comic relief, because it's otherwise too dark. But during the early days, right after our daughter Miranda died, my younger daughter, Beatrice, and I went up to go and check on her apartment, which just took an incredible amount of we had to go to get a court order to be able to enter her apartment. This was maybe a month or so after she died. And so we're really not looking forward to this task. We're not looking forward to what we might find. And we check into this Brooklyn hotel the night before, and we're greeted by this front desk guy. Maybe he has does musical theater on the side or something. I don't know. But we walk in and he says, "Why, hello, ladies. What brings you to New York?" And we're still kind of poleaxed. And we just, just some personal business. He goes, "Is it business or pleasure?" And at this point, I don't even know how to answer. And B, who has more presence of mind than I do, she says, "Well, it's not really that kind of trip." And he goes, "Oh, not even going to see a show?" And it just went on. And finally, and I hate having to do this.
Yeah,
I just
tell him.
said, "Well, actually, my daughter died recently, and we're here to clean her apartment." And the smile does not go away. He's just like, "Whoa, well, at least she's in a better place now. Am I right?"
Oh, the better place.
And I looked at him and I said, and now I'm now starting to find this funny because I can't believe this is going on like this. And I said, "Well, New Yorker that he is," I said, "she was in a pretty good place before. I mean, she had a 1-bedroom co-op, down near the Esplanade. I think that was pretty good." He goes, "Yeah, that was really good. Well, can I get you ladies some champagne?" And again, B looks and she says, "We're not really celebrating."
Yeah, back to the party.
We get back to and then anyway, he said, "Can I give you anything?" I said, "Yeah, a bottle of white wine, please." And then we just went upstairs. But I mean, it was like the drunken guards outside the castle. It just went on so ridiculously that you just had to find it absurd.
Yeah. No, I love that part of the book because I love the moment of dark humor. But I also, it took me back to the crazy things that people say. She's in a better place. I had people say that to me, and I wanted to take a sledgehammer to them. Like,
Yeah.
I see that little girl over there. She's 2 years old. Her mother just died. How could you say Adrian's in a better place?
Yeah.
Or people would get religious. I'm sure you heard that too. It's
Yeah.
God's will. God has a plan. Well, that's
God
a
has a
fucked
plan.
up. That's a fucked up plan.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's also so here's where I am sympathetic though, is that when people who can't fathom this kind of loss, and look, there are people who can't deal with loss at all generally, but like even if you lose your cat, but what they're trying to do in the best way possible. They want to comfort you, they want to give you hope. And they're looking at you just their friend, their beloved relative, and you are just shattered, and they're trying to do their best to comfort you. So I do believe this all comes from a very good place. But what I think you want in those moments is what I think of as leaning into the suck. You want someone to come up to you and say, "Oh my God, Danielle, Andy, this is so terrible. I am so sorry." Hug you and then say, "Can I get you another scotch?" Like
Mhm.
you want, and you don't want people to say, "Look, I'm here. If you ever need anything, reach out to me." Because that's also what am I going to do? Like you're putting the onus on
Right.
me to
Mhm.
provide help at a moment I can't even stand up. And always the better thing is to say, you know, "Hey, I'm going to be in your neighborhood. Do you want to go for a walk tomorrow?
Mhm.
I'm making extra lasagna. Do you want some?" Like
Yeah, take charge.
but just that kind of showing up and
Mhm.
checking in, I found has been the most helpful thing. And it's how, honestly, with that kind of support of friends, we were able to get through those early months.
Mhm.
But as you pointed out earlier, some people don't come out of this. One of the things that my husband David, who wrote just a beautiful article about Miranda for The Atlantic shortly after she died, it was the
Mhm. But by
first.
the way, this is my dog. His
Oh,
his his name is Ringo.
no! Oh
Yep.
my goodness!
Yep.
Yes,
I told David that when he was on my podcast.
yes, yes. We've had labs too. Yeah, this was a Cavalier King Charles
Mhm.
Spaniel. Ringo, Miranda was devoted to, and vice versa. But that was the first thing he was able to write when he didn't
Mhm.
think
It's
he could
beautiful.
write again.
Mhm.
And then, but so he got, of course, so many emails of people experiencing similar tragedies as, when you walk into the alternative universe, you're
Mhm.
suddenly meeting all these people. And and since I've published this book, just the theme of so many of the emails and reach outs is loneliness.
Mhm.
That people, it could be a single mother, could be just people who don't have a community and they're struggling with this on their own, and the whole world is moving on and their friends are moving on, and the world, and it moves on and you don't move on. And then you're aware, you become self-conscious. There's an expectation that maybe you're not handling your grief correctly. Like you're not going through those, legendary fictitious
Yeah.
stages
Yeah. Wait,
that,
am I grieving right?
yeah, am I grieving? Am I failing at grieving? I'm like, hey, wait, I thought should be at acceptance now. And I don't think I'm ever going to be at acceptance.
Right.
So that's truly the twofer of this kind of grief. It's not just the grief itself in all its dimensions. It's, I think, the accompanying loneliness that you have in it because
Yeah.
people just don't understand. And I'm sure you felt that way too. Not,
Yeah, and I want to ask you about your alternative universe because I remember like in the immediate days after Adrian died, just walking through the West Village where she died, and everything seemed like it was in slow motion. And I would look at people and I'd look at couples and they were holding hands and going about their lives and being looking happy. And I got so angry. I got so angry. Like, how could you be this happy when my life has just been turned upside down? So I'm interested to know, like, in that first week, which is always like that's the hardest. That's like the sledgehammer to the heart week
yeah,
because
yeah.
after a week you start like there's a pattern that starts to settle in, a routine, and you
A
and you
routine of pain
a
is what
routine, yeah,
it
right.
feels.
And you just like, okay, here's my pain, my grief, my mourning, and
Yeah,
that's going to be my life for a while. But like that, like feeling like you might fall, like it
yeah,
starts to get better. I'm curious what those first few days, what that first
yeah.
week was like in terms of you crossing over into that alternative universe.
Well, I do remember it vividly, and I don't remember a lot from that time either. A lot is blocked out, but
Hmm.
I remember first of all the feeling, like as you describe, and as I write in the book, that one morning you're just sitting, you're having your coffee, you're getting ready for your day, and suddenly a bomb lands on your house, explodes everything you knew is now a smoking ruin. Nothing, even though if it looks the same around you, nothing is the same. And so you're kind of reeling from that. And that's the sort of initial entry shock into the alternative universe. And then I found after we buried Miranda and, in the week following, I was like, it was almost a weird adrenaline rush. I wasn't angry. It was like being given these magic glasses where I was suddenly aware of all the suffering around me. It was as if I could suddenly see it for the first time. But I was also aware of, and I did things like I'd buy meals for homeless people, and Miranda used to leave water bottles beside them. I did all these things, and just reached out to everybody, to the checkout clerk. Hey, how is your day going? I really want to know, kind of thing. But then David began to call this, I'm just going to swear, sorry, our Miranda, I give no fucks to give. I have no fucks to give phase of our grief, because I equally became sensitive to cruelty or petty rudeness. And there were a few times where, somebody would say something to me and I would just look at them and say, why are you being so rude? Is there any reason for you to be this rude? And it startled people, but I just had no patience for anyone who would cause even the most minor kind of suffering on someone. So it was very mixed. It was a strange experience. And then the kind of adrenaline went away, and then I just collapsed. And that began like, Prometheus every morning, the eagle coming and not removing my liver, but removing my heart. The physical aspect of grief is something I wasn't prepared for. Like, you're going to be sad, but the actual physicality of grief is something, not many, until you experience it, understand it. It was, I describe it was like having an ice pick coming into my chest, like 24/7. I couldn't think straight. I lost interest in everything. I certainly couldn't write. I stopped listening to music. Everything around me reminded me of Miranda. I mean, a child is embedded in your life, in every corner, in every aspect of your life. And so I just became really a crumpled heap on the floor, unable to function and unable to get the relentlessness. Your brain is obsessing and struggling to accept this unacceptable fact, which is Miranda isn't here anymore. And the brain keeps rebelling, and then the pain flings you back down. So
yeah, well, that's why when you said before, like saying to somebody, like recognizing the crappy nature of this, like when I am with someone who has just experienced loss, what I say to them is, I'm really sorry you're going through this, because life's not fair and death sucks.
Yeah.
And it's going to take you a while to reconcile that, to get through that. And the days are going to be awful. But then one day you're going to notice that today was actually a little better than the day before.
Yeah.
And then you get to a point where you can start thinking about the person you lost. And that balance, that shift of like crying to like smiling and remembering good times, like you start to see that shift. And then over time, you move forward, you don't move on, but you're able to now get some semblance of life back. Someone said that to me when Adrian died. He was a friend of mine, and he came home one day and found his 14-year-old son hanging in the closet.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember going through that with him, and then he literally provided me a roadmap. Like he said, this is what it's probably going to look like. You're going to cry like every day, every hour, and the way I was wired, that meant so much more to me than a platitude or, everything's going to be okay. Like when people said, everything's going to be okay, I'd be like, it really isn't. It's not going to be okay.
You have the people who say, I can't even imagine. It's like, yeah, you can't.
Yeah.
Lucky you.
Yeah. But you're right. People do mean well.
Yeah.
They not everybody knows how to express themselves the best way. Nobody comes up with the right words, the right language, but when you're in that moment and someone says something to you that you think is kind of bonkers, I mean, you're at your weakest, you're at your most vulnerable, you're most sensitive,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
like racked with pain and grief, and it's like you may not be as patient with somebody if they say something boneheaded like she's in a better place,
Yeah.
But as time goes on, I found myself much more able to not only be patient, but to see the humor in it. Grief is such a crazy thing. You alluded to the 5 stages before. Like, I don't know how you feel about the 5 stages, or even more so, like, what are your thoughts on closure? I'm done, right? I'm done with grief. I'm graduated.
Yeah, I think, look, I don't want to bash the 5 stages because maybe in certain types of circumstances they align with what people go through. And I begin the book talking about the grief I'd suffered, and that was the loss of parents, including my husband David's mother, who died at 54 from leukemia. It wasn't sudden, but it was, early. And those, because they're in the natural order of the universe, even when they're sad, you are programmed, your nervous system, your brain, ever since you were a child, you knew someday that this was going to come. So I found that I grieved them completely differently than what happened when we lost Miranda. And I don't know if there will be closure. I've spoken to parents further along this path, and some have said what you have said, that I'm now at a point where I can think of my child and smile and just be grateful I had her as long as I did in my life. And I'm still not there. I just miss her every day. I still I call it like mugged by grief. You think it's going along okay. You're saying, wow, I'm really being able to be present in the moment. And then suddenly, a Facebook memory pops up, and there you are weeping again. Like, thanks, Facebook memory. I hate you. It's
another reason I hate Zuck.
yeah. Like I call it digital haunting. Like, all these devices around you are determined to make sure, that they can remind you how, even when you're trying to get by. Yeah, she died. Not here on the beach with you anymore,
Yeah, there's no grief filter on Facebook.
No, there's no grief filter. You can't turn them off. It's annoying.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been 20 years for me, and I've been at the place for a long time where I can think of Adrienne and laugh and smile, but I also, at least once a week, will find myself wailing and heaving, and sometimes I don't even know where it comes from, because the triggers, everybody has obvious triggers. Oh, I just heard the song we got married to, we danced to. Like, that's an easy trigger. But there could be a completely different trigger that has no real direct connection, but somehow it just gets in there. Because for me, I've always felt that, like, the grief, and obviously I have pretty strong views on closure, but it's always like right under the surface of your skin, right?
Yeah.
And it's there, but it's always there. And like a pimple, a red spot will pop every now and then.
Yeah.
And that's when you get triggered. And so I'm happy that there are people who do believe in closure and for whatever reason feel that they've reached it, they've achieved that. I always wonder if that's just like a forced thing, that they just tell themselves, I'm done, I can't do this anymore, and I'm not going to do this anymore. So I've reached closure. But for me, I can't even fathom it, because it's like, I have a kid who was 2. So every milestone of her life, she just graduated college. I was a weeping mess because her mom, my late wife, was not there to see it. There's going to be weddings, there'll be children, there'll be other things, first job, it never ends. And that's where that balance is so important over time, because you allow yourself to go down that dark hole when you need to, but then you have enough that, lifts you up and out of it. you know.
Yeah, I mean, I have real closure with my parents' death. My mother is still alive, thank God. She's 90.
Mm.
She's been a tremendous help through this. But when my stepfather died in 2013, I was exceptionally close to him. He was like my real father, and he had been a soldier, he'd been a journalist, incredible person, led an incredible life. And I write about this too, it's just in that forward about the different types of grief. And he was so ready to go. Like he was just, he hated being weak. His heart had an infection. He's like, I'm out of here. It's fine. And he went in good humor. We all were able to say goodbye to him. In fact, when Miranda, who was also very close to him, walked into the hospital room to say her goodbye, my stepfather, Pete, looked at her and he said, I'll see you down there, pointing at the floor. Like, that's the kind of guy he was. And so when he went, of course, I was sad. But it was what I never understood the concept of a good death. Like I was comforted by knowing he was ready. And all the sadness of missing him was really helped and offset by his attitude towards it and the natural order of things. I don't know how you find closure in these very sudden, tragic instances. I think what I understand about it is that you learn to carry the grief. And then down the road, it's like having, I don't know, chronic disease or an old war wound or something that you get pretty good at carrying it. And then, ow, my leg hurts, like it just flares up and suddenly you're hurled back into sadness.
Yeah.
So but I guess the thing is that's how you recover, right? You just get used to it. You just adapt to it as you would with any kind, it's like being hit with a crippling illness or something. You just have to learn how to move with it.
Yeah, well, it's like Joan Didion said, life changes in an instant. That's it.
Yeah.
And you do have to be able to roll with that change. Otherwise, your life is just not going to be as fulfilling as it can. And I know, like, after a death or a horrible, tragic, sudden death, like, you feel guilty, like when you laugh. You feel guilty if you're enjoying yourself. You feel guilty. I remember the first time I went on a date years later, I was like, I'm cheating on my wife, but
Yeah.
she's dead.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to a woman once when I couldn't be there the way she needed me emotionally, this was
Yeah.
like right at the beginning, like when I first started dating. And I said, I don't know what to say. I'm in love with a dead woman. And she kind of looked at me like, wow, I'm probably never going to hear that again in my life. But it was like, that was it. I mean, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to crawl through this re-entry of this thing called dating if I ever want to be with someone again. But it's not going to be pretty for me or for anybody. I felt sorry for the people I was with. But, the sudden death versus the illness thing, it is so interesting because it isn't a contest, because you could look at both processes and you can find something better or worse in both of them. In a way, because of Miranda's illness, you in a way have dealt with both of those things. Like you watched her go through her illness, and that was already a part of your life, even though you never expected or anticipated this kind of thing. And then you experience sudden. So you really are walking in both of those shoes. But I think, if I had a choice, I mean, it's crazy to say that I would have rather watched Adrienne wither away for 6 months or a year. But I watched what her tragic sudden death did to everyone. And
it was brutal.
It's hard it probably was a better way, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
It's illness is something you can't ultimately help, whereas what you experienced. And I wonder, one of the things that has really helped me through this, and I write about this as well, is EMDR therapy for PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what you have when
Sure.
a trauma like this level, and even other traumas, your brain literally can't process it. And so what you describe of finding her with this new, I mean, that is a scene, that is hard to get out of your head and hard, I think, I would guess, to get by. I mean, just to see my own daughter's dead body was very hard for me. And so just to be able to process that, to kind of almost, when I do these sessions, it's almost like, I think, like an exorcism, like the thing that I was upset about, obsessing over, the thing that was making me scream, like a vision like that, I was able to talk it through, and then it ceases to have that element of shock and making, disabling me the way it used to. It doesn't make you less sad, and it doesn't make the memory less horrible, but it certainly has allowed me to cope better with it. Because, yeah, I don't know how I would have kept going, just having to deal with everything that you have to deal with, especially as it surrounds your child.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned PTSD, and you clearly would have it as well. Do you worry about your other children? Like, does that spill into your relationship with them? Do you find yourself concerned about things that, you never really did before, or maybe only a little? I mean, does it change your whole view on life and the living, as well as on death and dying?
Well, when with a sibling loss, I think, is its own thing and its own trauma. People say, well, all of us grieve differently, and that's true. But I think there are real commonalities among certain types of grief. And our family was very tight. She has a younger brother who is now 32, which was her age when she died. So he was 30, and our youngest was 22. And she was, the first. She was the leader of all things. They all loved each other, and my son and younger daughter just looked to her as for everything. So that hole gets blown open in the side of the family and between them, and so suddenly they're having it's a whole recalibration, and that suddenly they have to kind of figure out now who they're going to be and what their relationship is going to be with each other, with the absence of this critical person. And then same with the parents. One of the things I write about, especially as a mother, is this was the first time I was unable and incapable of comforting my children. It's just so automatic, as you know, as a parent, fasten their seatbelt first, like,
Right.
And I was so incapacitated that, and aware, and feel so guilty that they could hear me through the walls howling. As you say, it's a very unique, I think it's called keening. It's the wail of grief. And it goes right down into the bottom of your, chest.
Until you have nothing left.
Until you have nothing left, and then you're just heaving and gasping. And so they would have to hear that. And in some ways, and I've heard this, by the way, in other families, it's quite common for then the children, especially if they're adult children, but even younger, to have a role reversal and start taking care of the parent. And that also, I saw them doing that. And even with their father, who David was more outwardly stoic, but, wrenched inside, that they, having to hear your parents cry, having to see them this week, not being able to turn to them for comfort is a very difficult thing. And I got to a point where I could, and since then have been working very, very hard to make sure everybody is okay. But we all keep getting hit. And
Mm-hmm.
we've learned to talk to each other in ways like, if I want to talk to B about something relating to Miranda, I will say to her, is it okay if I talk about this? And she will either say, I don't think I can listen to it right now, or she'll say, yeah, go ahead. So,
Mm-hmm.
there's some of these landmines everywhere. And you just are trying to make sure that everybody is healing. But also, as you know, with grief, it's like a tide. You think you're up on the beach, and then suddenly a wave hits, you're sucked back down.
Mm-hmm.
It just is relentless that way. So, it's been 2 years. I would say it's only been 2 years. Other people might say, wow, it's been 2 years. You're still thinking about it. Somebody actually literally said to me, are
It's
you?
time. It's time
No,
to move
no,
on.
no. Worse. He said, oh, are you still doing the grief thing?
Wow. Really?
Yeah,
My
yeah.
goodness. The
But
grief thing.
the grief thing.
Actually, you
Pretty
should get
good
a
friend.
T-shirt with that.
Still doing the grief thing. Well, actually, this is a case for, when the Victorians would all wear black for a year. Like, that's a great thing. Like, if we had a little black armband or a ribbon
Mm-hmm.
or something, where people just knew not to come up and be a dick with you or
Yeah.
say the wrong thing,
Maybe,
like,
maybe the
I
shirt
am
should be
in
like, I'm
mourning.
still fucking grieving. Back the fuck off.
Yeah, well, that would be me some days. But no, it was actually a really, when you think about it, civilized way of signaling, not just respecting your loss, but also signaling to the outside world, I'm not myself.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
I loved reading about the family, and you talk about that in the book, and that also resonated with me because I have a close family, I have a lot of kids, and when Adrian died, my first wife Lisa, she stepped up, still has stepped up. She's become like a mother to Sophie. Her daughter with her ex-husband is I consider her my fifth child, and I was so moved by the obvious love and deep bond you and David have, and how you leaned on each other as you navigate through this nightmare. And you write in the book that the two of you are the only people who know exactly what the other's been experiencing, which I just found so profound. But you don't really think of it in those terms until someone says it like you have. Have you ever thought about what this journey would be like if you'd been divorced or widowed and not
oh,
had such a partner
I
in this
a-
madness?
and look, even in the very best of marriages, you can totally see how it would just fall apart.
Yeah.
Um, it's so easy for me. And we were lucky. We had a strong marriage. It will be 38 years this year. And but as I was describing when it first happened, and my impulse was to go and curl up in a corner and howl.
Hmm.
David's was to kind of withdraw and into his own head and sort of busy himself in the day, but then he'd wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning and be like me. And we were doing this for a bit, and when I think during one of my howling sessions, he came to me and he said, he just held on to me and he said, we can't let each other disappear into our own silos of grief. If we're going to get through this, we have to do it together. And it's what I needed to hear. And it gave me, it helped, it pulled me away from the silo, that he was there for me when I was, curled up, and then I was there for him because I made him talk about it. Like, I think he got to the point where he would be worried that if he said anything, I would, be set off, which was a good worry. But I wasn't set off. As I said, we were the only two people in the world who knew exactly what the other had lost, and we both, and that also the aspect of it being Miranda. And so that's how we got through it. But I've heard of instances where, well, you said some people never come out of it. I know of a mother who just retreated, and was gone, like physically still there,
Hmm.
but 10 years later is still like a missing person from the family. My paternal grandmother, who I wrote about, lost her first son on his first mission out in World War II. And they were in rural Australia. wasn't a lot of support groups in rural Australia in the 1939 or 40. And she just drank herself to death. She was within 5, and that's actually a real thing, that your mortality rate as a parent, especially as a mother, goes up. Like, you are much more likely to die within 5 years of your child, because I think you stop taking care of yourself. Some commit suicide, some just become addicts. Like, I totally get the impulse. And so, you're struggling at so many levels. And I just feel I was very fortunate to have David there, who articulating those thoughts. Nat, our son, also said at one point very early on, he said, the worst thing we could do to Miranda's memory is let this destroy our family. So there was real push and effort amongst all of us, even though we were all limping, to just not let the whole unit fall apart. And it still goes on. I mean, it still is an effort to keep checking in on each other, keep making sure that, they are doing okay.
Yeah, I often think about like how I would have gotten through my situation back then if I didn't have the family I had. Like, this happens to people who are divorced, who are widowed, who don't have children, or that was their only child, and all of a sudden they find, I have friends who had a tragedy with 2 of their children. It was a pretty sensational story in Manhattan. The 2 of their young children were killed by the nanny. And,
oh my gosh.
And they just vowed, this is not going to divorce us. We are going to get through this. And because it is so easy for people to just sink into a
Well, you just
hole.
give up. I mean, you give up on yourself. I mean, if you'd known me before this, my nickname amongst my friends was the Minister of Fun. And there I am, the now former Minister of Fun.
Director of Death is your new title.
Director, or like hunched over wanting to commit suicide. Like, I'd never been suicidal in my life, but I could understand that for the first time I suddenly got it, of why people do it, because the pain of living is so bad that the sort of promise and peace of death seems better. And when you also think about that from the perspective of a mother, like, what a horrible thought. Like, really, you're thinking of that while you have living children and a husband, but you're in that much crazy pain that the thought flits through your head,
Well, sure. I mean, suicide. I went to Sophie actually got us into like this one day. It was supposed to be a 2-day, but it was during COVID, so it was one day grief camp. We did that a bunch of years ago, and while she was off with the kids, the parents were in a circle for the whole day just talking. And I would say half of the adults that were there had a spouse who had death by suicide. I learned so much about suicide. It's not a rational thing. It's just people get so filled with despair. And the interesting thing that I learned was that it's not an act of selfishness, which I had thought. I had previously
I thought that too. How dare you? How dare you do this to people?
But these folks who do that, they actually believe they're doing their family a favor.
Yeah.
And that their lives will be better without them. And when you think about it in those terms, I mean, it just sort of like creeps up and grabs you. And it's like, imagine that. Imagine thinking like your child, you are so depressed, so full of your own personal struggles, emotional struggles, and mental health issues that you believe that your child will be better off without you. That's how irrational it is.
Well, and I'm thinking like, I know I'm not going to do this, but even the fact that I could think it was disturbing to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, God, I mean, you and David have been living every parent's worst nightmare. And under the it's not a contest umbrella, I found myself saying, and I still do a million times, like, losing a child is the worst possible thing you could ever experience.
Well, until you lose 2, as you point out, like some of the emails I get, oh my goodness, they begin with like, so when our two children were both killed in a traffic accident, or when we lost our only daughter to X. Like, it's like Bruegel's painting of hell. Like you're everybody is getting tortured in some different way.
Yeah, I think
but you're all down there getting tortured.
Yeah, well, we had this TV show about the JFK Jr. a couple of months ago, which was a whole big sensation. But I thought again about the Bissett family. Like,
oh my gosh, yeah.
You go from one day having these two beautiful, fun, smart, accomplished daughters, and the next day you have no children.
Like, well, you have one daughter left. There were three Bissett girls. No, and then they were treated. We can gossip, but they were treated so shabbily by the Kennedys, and it was almost an act of murder by JFK Jr. Like someone who had no business flying that plane. And then, I in fact, when that was airing, and I read some books about that incident and things, I was just thinking, how about the mother, about the loss of those two girls. And I think the Daily Mail followed up with the still living sister, and she has just retreated as well. I mean, she has a family, but like she just lives, anonymously. It must have just smashed everything apart in that family.
Yeah, well, it makes you feel, especially when you've been through something like that, you don't have to imagine. But for those who haven't, people, just one day your life could be amazing, and the next day it's a nightmare. There's some things in the book. There's so many profoundly moving comments and phrases about grief, and I'd love to quickly run through a few of them and get the meaning behind them, because I was furiously writing them down. I actually started listening to your book on a jog, and besides like being a jogging weeping mess, because when you talked about like the police radio chatter being like the soundtrack to tragedy, like I have such vivid memories of the keychains and the clanking and the radios, and that just triggered me. And then the service being at Riverside, which was where Adrian's service was, I was like,
oh boy,
I was like half a mile into my jog, and people were looking at me like I'm crazy. But then I went from that to like jogging and writing notes at the same time on my phone. But the first one is, grieving is the hardest pain you'll ever know.
I think it's what we were saying, just the unexpected physicality of it. And the way I've now learned to think of my nervous system as a completely independent organ, because even when you're not even consciously aware of something happening, like an anniversary coming up, for example, suddenly you'll feel yourself starting to like go into some grief pattern, and then you'll say, oh right, then you'll remember. So like just your whole nervous system is part of this. The part that makes you tired, exhausted all the time, makes you vulnerable, just making really bad decisions, because you're not thinking things through. Maybe you shouldn't get and drive a car either, because you're not present in what's going on. And the obsessions, just the obsession, what if this, what if that, or why didn't I do this? How could this, that's a very familiar part of early grief. What if she had left the house 5 minutes later and then she wouldn't have been hit by, so you go through these scenarios as if it's going to bring them back. I think I quote a Hollywood agent whom we befriended, who was, just ahead of us. I think of these as intake officers, these people you meet who are ahead of you, intake officers in the alternative universe. I remember speaking to him, David and I, he's on speakerphone, and his daughter had died at almost exactly the same age as Miranda, and very suddenly. And he said, okay, David, Danielle, what if I were to say to you, the angel Gabriel, whoever, was to come down and say, David and Danielle, if you jump off this building, you'll get Miranda back. Miranda will come back. Would you do that? And David and I didn't even hesitate. He said, of course we do that. And he goes, well, that's not on the table. Like very, very WMA, it's not, but that's true. It's not on the table. No matter how much you try and obsess and rethink this, she's not coming back. And that's the thing that your brain is struggling with. So that part of the hardest thing you'll ever do. And the hardest part is learning to appreciate your own life and start, as you said earlier, trying to relive it, like not just as a shadow or living even for others, but to find a way to start living for yourself again. And that's really, really hard. And along with all the other efforts that we talk about, the effort to keep the marriage going, the effort to keep your other children, comforted, all of that just takes enormous, enormous work.
This next one is kind of connected, of course, to that. When you say they knew grief, but they had not met grief.
Yeah. That's the non-universe versus the alternative. It's even people who've lost a parent in old age, and I don't want to minimize that, especially, but it's but the very first line of my book is, I thought I knew grief. And I didn't, in this sense, not with the capital G. And I think one could go happily through life. I wish I could. Not knowing that, except in the most ordinary ways, eventually losing an elderly parent, losing your beloved dog. And I don't say that lightly, that's kind of the ordinary way of things. But I think we like to think we're immune from tragedy, and that it always happens to other people. But when it hits you and you realize you're not immune to it, that's where you really meet grief.
Grief is selfish.
Yeah. Well, as my therapist said, grief has a big eye. Like, it's all consuming. And like, as I was saying, in the early days with my children, I had no capacity to take care of anyone else, to think of anyone else. And you are deeply consumed with your own. I mean, look, if you had a terrible accident and your leg got cut off and you're bleeding and screaming in pain, but there was no help for it, there's no painkiller or ambulance team, you'd be pretty focused on the bleeding, painful leg. And that's what it's like. And that's why it was so important what David did, and why I'm so grateful to him is we have to go through this together, because otherwise I think everyone's impulse is just to retreat into themselves and their own pain.
My last question is also sort of an observation, but Miranda in the book emerges as such a vivid, funny, smart, complicated, and deeply loved person. This book is a memoir, but in so many ways, the book is as much about her as it is about you and your journey through this tragedy. What do you want people, when they sit down to read the book, what do you hope they take away from it about Miranda? What do you want them to know about her and her life?
Well, it's interesting. She wasn't originally in the book. And again, I didn't even begin this as a book. It just began. That's why it's called Dispatches. As a journalist, I just started scribbling notes about the experience. And I wanted to focus it on maternal grief. And I also didn't want to write about her specifically, because it's just objectively very hard to do. And especially in the state of mind that I've been in. And B, I wanted to keep her privacy too. So I didn't want to misrepresent her or something. But one of person I showed it to, who was one of my first editors, a good editor, I showed her this early draft and she said, "You have to put Miranda in it." I said, "Well, I can't." And she goes, you have to put her in. And so gradually I began weaving Miranda into the story. And what it was, and I write about, like, she put gray hairs on us in adolescence,
as they do.
as they do. But she was she was wonderful, but she was also just so rebellious. She just had just no respect for authority of any kind, and going right back to when she was a child. And she wasn't like throw tantrums. She just, nope, not doing it. Not doing math. What's the point of math? Like that kind of thing. And so it became important to me to, without invading her privacy or, talking too much about these things, that the way we remember people, the way we remember our dead, is by not deifying them, not only remembering them as these angels, only their good qualities. Like, I know from, like, when I joined David's family, I felt very close to all his grandmothers who had died 10, 20 years before I met him, because they were always talking about them. But in these funny ways, like, you got to know his grandfather's quirks, his, strange aversions, aside from their good qualities, and all through anecdotes and stories. And so it was important to me to try, if I was going to capture Miranda, to capture her in all of her many dimensions. And as she got through that difficult early stage, and she just became, always was, but this incredibly clever, witty, funny person who was adventurous, who I just, as we all look to for all, advice, she became really not just my daughter, but my best friend, as she became an adult. Nat once said, he says, I'm never going to know what restaurant to eat in anymore. Like, that's how micro she affected our lives. Like, if we'd take a family trip, she would have it all down, where to go, not the tourist places, but the cool place. Like, she just had it all. She always was, again, our leader in all things. So when she was gone, it's well, this is true with any death, that part of you, when we say, we're not going to be the same people, well, that's not least because the person you were with that person, you will never be with anyone else.
Yeah.
And so we all feel that. And I feel I'll never be the person I was with Miranda when we hung out together.
Yeah. Well, when I made my documentary and people asked me, what did I want to accomplish? I said, I want to bring her back to life, even for 90 minutes in a film. And I want people to get to know her and love her. And on some level, have them mourn her loss the way we've been mourning her loss. And I think in your book, you've accomplished that really well with Miranda. We know who she is, and we can feel that loss on a really profound level. So congratulations again. Everyone should read this book. It'll resonate with everyone, whether you've been through something sudden and tragic or not. Death is death, and it sucks no matter how people die. It's called Dispatches from Grief, A Mother's Journey Through the Unthinkable. Congrats again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alrighty, take care. This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhinecliff, with additional editing by Maddie Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Langell. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Back Room with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.